There are 4 tests that we use to measure power in our range of motion clients, and those following their range of motion individualized programming, who are our online clients. And these 4 tests, they measure elements of power. Power, of course, being not only your ability to move an external weight quickly, but also your ability to move your own body weight quickly. And these tests encompass both of those 2 areas. The first of our tests is from an Olympic lifting background, and it is a max hang power clean. A couple of qualifications on this. The hang power clean must begin above the knee. We take it from above the knee as opposed to the ground, as this takes some of the technique, element or requirement out of this, and is a true test of power. The other things that are important with this is we do require the individual to receive that power clean with their feet in a squat width stance. So there are some technique qualifications here to ensure that this is performed consistently with a high degree of movement quality. Our second test here is also from an Olympic weightlifting background, and this is a max push jerk. Again, we're not using a max split jerk for this, which starts to bring in more of those technique elements as opposed to testing pure power. The movement quality or the standard on this requires the individual not to press out that bar overhead, so as you would see in a proper Olympic lifting jerk. The third of our tests now starts to test trunk flexion. So if we look at that first movement, it was very much extension of the trunk, of the hip, of the torso with an upper body pull based movement. The second test was very much pressing power. So we've had pulling power, posterior chain power, and pressing power so far in our first 2 tests. Our third test is a 5-stroke max ski erg for maximum wattage. So the individual from a standing start with the fan not spinning on the ski erg will complete 5 strokes as powerfully as possible. At the end of those 5 strokes, we take the peak wattage, which was achieved over those 5 strokes, and that is their score. Again, if we look at the hang power clean, which tests hip extension, the ski erg now tests hip flexion. And instead of it being an overhead or pressing based movement, instead of going into shoulder flexion, we're now going into shoulder extension. So you can see 2 other movements that we've ticked off as part of this overall testing battery. Our final test is a max height jump squat. This is not a counter movement jump or a standard jump. The athlete or the individual must pass their hip down below the top of their knee as part of this jump squat. What this is testing is not the posterior chain power, which you may see in a standard jump, which of course has already been tested in the hang power clean, but this now becomes a more anterior chain power dominant movement, being a little bit more quadricep hip flexor based than it is hamstring and posterior chain based. The individual will quite simply mark on a wall their max overhead reach, and then complete a full depth squat, exploding out of that squat into a max height jump. And we then measure the distance between the height reached with the overhead reach when standing, and that reached in the overhead reach at the top of a squat. These 4 tests make up our power testing battery.